Hello, future Chloe. And yes, you did put on makeup because you didn't want to possibly think about the future in which you decided to look upon this video and wanted to see your acne-ridden face due to the stress you've been experiencing this week. Anyways, I had recently written this down for you in the future. Don't know if you'll ever see this in the future, but feel maybe it's healthy for me to voice my concerns. They don't tell you much about anything nowadays. It's either an extremely sensitive topic or nobody's willing to talk about it. That can be divorce, suicide, depression, insomnia, anxiety, and more than I'm willing to fathom. I clearly am invested in topics I just mentioned, but I hardly even know about them. I know as a young child I had to deal with two divorces, one with my biological parents when I was around the age of 4, and another with my stepdad and mom when I was 10. I could never fully comprehend how much of an impact those divorces had on me until later years, in which I would find myself thinking that I was at fault for them. Your stepdad wasn't ready to have kids. I don't understand why anyone would say this to their young, impressionable children and then go on to give examples citing that it was our fault. However, school always said that it was never the child's fault that the parents had gotten divorced. However, that did not stop me from thinking it was my fault. Maybe that's the reason I'm fucked up. I now start to believe it's my fault all the time. Why wouldn't it be? My mother's divorce wasn't my fault. What's to say my biological parents' divorce wasn't my fault? It makes sense. My parents were incompatible. But because they had kids, my father felt pressured to get married. At least that's what my grandma told me. Now that I know what I can place blame on to myself for the divorce, I mean, I was the reason they got married. I don't know. Now I had successfully adopted the mentality, I could easily apply it to other situations in my life. My orchestra does bad at our concert. I didn't practice enough. That's why everyone sounds bad. The problem is that I know that I had the wrong mentality, but because of its presence in my life, I've gotten so used to it that before I can even comprehend the situation, I immediately jump to that point. This thus leads to depression because it's unhealthy to think that you are the cause of all bad things in life. So now at 16, I am unable to not be depressed. It's like being stuck in a room with only switches between drastic temperatures. One day it's frigid and you don't even dare to move because you would be exposing yourself. Other days it's so hot that you have to leave your room, the safest place you know and the only place you feel comfortable. However, leaving your room results in consequences, so you're better off staying in the blithering heat. Miserable. You still have to leave that room much to your displeasure, which then results in a very important choice that you will have to make every day. Do I suck it up and pretend I don't have depression, or do I look miserable and look depressed? Sadly, both choices have severe effects. If you suck it up all day, you get so frustrated that you struggle to breathe, like you are on the verge of either a panic attack or a mental breakdown or both. When you get home, you can finally relax and breathe. However, in my case, at least results in me taking naps for over 2 hours. If you look miserable, people start pestering you, asking if you're okay. That's the last thing you want because now people are paying attention to you, and you are what's taking up parts of their mind when you shouldn't be. Another consequence would be that your actions that day will now be playing in your memory reel, and you'll hate yourself and your actions more than ever. This thus leads to self-induced insomnia, as I would call it, because now all you can think about is, and is just how terrible of a person you are. By God, would I do anything to get that voice out of my head? Adults would say to read, to wind down. How could I, though? I'm a nitpicker. If I see or read something that may make perfect sense in a story, I will be so stressed because I would be trying to rewrite an entire section or come up with better ways for such a situation or dialogue would play out. Who am I kidding, though? I love to read. I read all night anyways. Another problem with the reading, though, is the absolute lack of sound. So I'll turn on some music, but then I'm going to go down the rabbit hole of absolutely everything. I just listen to someone complain, then read all night, but then I would rather be asleep. I would say my life is just a slippery slope of problems. I wouldn't even fathom fixing this. This leads into another topic. I should probably talk about suicide. Suicide will always and should bring up some powerful feelings, but it's rarely for the best. God, for the amount I think about committing suicide, you would think I'd feel more comfortable with being able to express my feelings about it. Maybe it's all the anxiety that keeps me from trying to conceptualize what I see and think into words as onto a piece of paper. I do, however, at least try to say it. So here, I I have thought about suicide since around 5th grade, where I believed it was during the second semester of school where I had my breakdown. I couldn't really cope with my feelings. That was the first time my parents were aware of my suicidal thoughts. It would go on to build up and keep building. I would write back, then a lot, like how I'm writing now. The only difference is my writing has improved. I would hope so, that it did at least. It'd be sad if it didn't. I think I have a few more breakdowns when I was still in 5th grade, but I had done my best to suppress any memory from that time. So all I really remember is how much I hated myself and how much support I could feel I was receiving from my father and stepmother. I put a lot of unjust I had put a lot of unjust pressure on my mom to try and fix me or something like that. All my attempts were fruitless, however, and I never received the help I felt like I needed. But that was not entirely her fault. Even writing this now, I feel like such a burden to my family. They tried and tried and tried and tried, and I still ended up being a fucking waste of space who only clutters other brilliant personalities. I digress, however, because I need to understand that I have some worth even though when I say that I feel no emotions, it's empty. I don't remember 6th grade at all at this point. I think that even if I was depressed at that time, I was a more confident person. I was so cringy though, so it doesn't matter because I feel embarrassed by my actions, even if I don't remember them. What I do remember was I had gone to some divorce therapy at our school because divorce still had an impact at that time, even if I didn't know. The group was fairly diverse, and that was cool. But all I could really remember was how on finals I had to be in the group, as well as finish other tests, meaning I had about 45 minutes to do what I remember was 100 questions. I think I got an A. 7th grade was just another low for me. I was at a new school, and while I knew some friends, or some kids, I also felt really alone. The friends I did make, I had either drifted away from or clung to like crazy until I didn't. I wish I could say I had this really big meltdown which had this huge impact on my happiness or my depression, but I don't remember much. All I know is I was good at the program ETD. I do know that by the end of the year, I was trying to cut off most of my friends I had made that year. 8th grade was rocky at best. Some days were great, even if I'd prefer to not even think about it. I met a boy I liked, and we had several interests, which was really nice. We'd quickly became friends, and he liked some other girl, which was really hard for me. When they originally started dating, however, after a week of getting over it, I was ready to participate. Funnily, though, the relationship hardly lasted a week. He found it funny, and we had a good rest of the year. 9th grade, however, I distinctly remember having breakdowns and being stressed out of my mind. Early in the school year, I had got my first boyfriend. He was my best friend from 6th grade till then. I did also start liking another boy, but he doesn't play a role in this stupid story. However, my boyfriend would also be a junior, and I guess I should have known. We don't look for the same things in a relationship. He would go on to dump me about 2 to 3 months later, and according to the girl he dumped me for, he had cheated on me. It doesn't matter now, the logistics. I just remember crying and having huge breakdowns right around New Year's. My dad would also go out go on to be kicked out of his house by my stepmother or her parents. I don't really remember because they were both alcoholics. While my father wasn't my closest link at that time, as I had heavily relied on my mom for emotional support. It was really hard to go through. Thus, I didn't see my father for what felt like years, but was probably only a month. During this time, I was still dealing with the relationship drama and whatnot because I also had isolated myself from a lot of people I was talking to, thus making me alone. Things did start to pick up, however, towards the end of the year as my dad was finally able to live back at the house and we were on a healthy schedule again. For once, I had what I would call a grace period where I would meet one of my newest and extremely close friends. Even if I would end up having breakdowns, it just felt like I was with my dad and my friends. Nothing bad could happen. Starting 10th grade was hell on earth all over again. I was stressed. I was taking harder courses. My mom felt like she flipped a switch. I had hours of homework because I didn't understand time management at the beginning of the year. I inst must have instigated something. I don't know. Anyways, she would fight with me that I had no time for the families and things like that. When I would fight back to defend my position, she would just go on to get more heated. This, I would say, was entirely my fault, but I'm also a stupid, impulsive teenager who can't comprehend actions entirely at this point. This would happen multiple times whenever she would have me for her week, until one week I had gotten grounded, and I can't honestly say I know why. I've forgotten now. During the weekend I was grounded, I was just chilling in my room because she was holding my computer over my head and wanted me to clean the filthy house that she had made disgusting for her for an entire hour of computer time. I refused. I may have too much pride, I should say. Regardless, while I was laying on that treadmill, passing time, reading some stupid shit online, my mom was arguing with her boyfriend. I hate arguing. It stresses me out. I was contemplating calling the police due to how loud and heated it was getting. However, when I heard an audible slap, there was no way I was not calling the cops. It was terrifying. I told my brother what was going on, and he called her dad and blessed that man that he had came. The only good thing that came from it is I was finally able to call my close friend, and I got my computer back. Success. I was so stressed, I only told a handful of kids. A very small handful of kids. Things would not get better. I was so uncomfortable at my mother's house that the next time I came over I couldn't breathe. I was on my toes and stayed in my room, only to leave at midnight. I must have returned to some form of normalcy, because by Christmas, while still on edge, it was nowhere near to the month or so before. I can't really pinpoint where everything started falling apart again. I would like to say it was somewhere around March, but I also remember that it was bright and sunny outside, so I have no fucking clue. Arguments would still happen, and most of the time I would just try my best not to think about anything and to just not say anything. However, this is my story, and I am a complete fuck up, so that's not how it goes. One night, after a very painful week with her, I had it with her constantly berating, or whatever the fuck she was saying. I had snapped, told her how I can't comprehend, how she doesn't at the very least understand something about me, how she had stressed me out, or how I don't understand how she couldn't recognize that. The weekend That weekend we had gotten into a huge argument, and from what I remember, I was at my dad's house for what I think was about 3 weeks. We would get into another argument about her insulting my stepmother and grandma, as well as insulting my intelligence and my ability to pick what I wanted to pick. However, I feel that grossly underrepresents the whole picture. If I had another argument with her, I couldn't fucking tell you at this point. They all just bleed together. I guess you would ask, well, how does this tie into depression and suicide? I just complained about my 10th grade year for about 2 pages. Well, I was also dealing with all this other shit in February, which got me called to the deans because some kid and I were having a heated disagreement, and he had taken screenshots of unfavorable stuff I had said. However, not only did I have to go to the deans, but I also had to deal with a social worker at my school, and I was pretty fucking stressed and having what I would call a panic attack and mental breakdown at the same time, which would lead to an unfavorable amount of suicidal thoughts at that time. This, I guess, leads to the fact that whoop-de-doo, I started writing suicide notes on days that I was so stressed I was incapable of really breathing. However, it's not very fun to write sorry 7,000 times over. While I have no poetic conclusion to draw on, I have nothing left to really give, I guess. Most people just joke around how they have mental breakdowns or something, they can just push it off. guess I can't. I've become so accustomed to the thought of killing myself and the thought of death that I'd rather there be no God, no purgatory, nor hell. I just want my being to cease to exist and be no longer.